Hello, everybody. I'm going to talk about something really cool today. It's the AWS Certified Data Analytics Specialty exam. So, this is a new exam that came out mid April. It's pretty much completely fresh. It's updated with the newest facts and figures from AWS. And I had the opportunity of taking this exam today. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what I feel the exam is like and what to look for, how to learn, how to prepare for it. So, the data analytics specialty exam is effectively going to be replacing the big data specialty exam, right? So, essentially, this big data specialty is going to be retired. You can still take both, right? You still have the ability to do both. And I must say that being big data certified before and taking the data analytics specialty now is kind of the same. The knowledge areas required are kind of the same. The big data exam does have a lot more machine learning content in it, whereas the data analytics specialty really covers more, the ingestion, ETL, and visualization part. So let's look at the exam guide. So first thing we have to note, 5 years of experience with data analytics. That's a common requirement for specialty certifications, 5 years being in the field, right? Yeah, you need to be familiar with the tools. You need to be familiar with the typical approaches with data analytics. Maybe 5 years is a little much for some, but not enough for others who focus maybe on just data ingestion or just data prep, right? You can be a data scientist and you focus on data prep for 5 years, but the actual analytics are done by another team. So this is where it's difficult to say how much experience is really necessary. So they're ballparking this as 5 years because in 5 years you're probably going to work in different fields and you really need to know the whole data analytics pipeline, right? You need to know all the options that you have for ingestion. You need to weigh the options for ETL. And then, of course, output and visualization is, you know, uh, there's different answers for different types of access, right? A lot of answers for these questions will be dependent on whether the data needs to be accessed all the time, immediately, whether it's near real time, whether it's data that's going to be processed, in every so and so, once monthly or etc. 2 years experience working on AWS. Yeah, definitely you have to be familiar with Kinesis, all Kinesis tools. We're talking about data streams, we're talking about Firehose, data analytics. Those three are crucial. You need to understand Redshift and Redshift Spectrum in detail. S3, right? Understanding how to design S3 for these services that consume S3, like for example, Glue and Athena, that will actually use S3 as the underlying storage, or how to ingest data efficiently into S3, how to transfer data efficiently from S3 to other services like the EMR, the Elastic MapReduce service, right? The Elastic MapReduce service is a service that allows you to build Hadoop clusters with all kinds of other features on them. A lot of emphasis on Spark in this exam. A lot of emphasis on in-memory processing. Presto is also something you need to be familiar with it with EMR itself, and then of course how you do security in EMR, authentication in EMR through Kerberos with integration with Active Directory. That's something you need to know. Then we've got questions about EMR encryption, right? EMR is a bit tricky on encryption because it doesn't have a built-in option saying encrypt it, right? So you need to figure out the encryption options for EMR and be familiar with them. Also, running and scaling clusters, cluster high availability, right? Now that you have the ability to run a multi-node master for something like HBase clusters on EMR, that brings a whole sort of new ball game to EMR. That's a whole new system now. So expect questions on this exam about the newest features, about the multi-master cluster capabilities in EMR. Then, of course, Glue, all the features that Glue supports, the cataloging, the ETL, the SQL queries, the PySpark that it supports, all of that. Athena is a generally wide sort of range of questions going to be with concerning Athena, how to ingest data efficiently in Athena, right? Always know that Athena is good with columnar formats like Parquet and Orc, right? Where columnar formats will really save a lot on ingestion. Then also ingesting data into other services, ingesting data into HDFS, S3 DISCP, of course, the logical answer here if you're ingesting a lot of files into HDFS. Then what else should I mention here? Ingestion into Redshift. How do you do copy operations into Redshift from S3? What's the optimal way of doing it? Is it one single copy operation? Is it one single file? Or is it multiple files and parallel copy operations? That's something you need to be familiar with it. Also Redshift security, auditing that the Redshift has built in. All of those you'll need to know. You'll need to know a lot about, right? There is not a lot of emphasis on ML, and all the ML questions that I seem to have on the exam were concerning how to do things, how to do something like a certain type of analysis or finding outliers in a data set in the easiest possible way, right? And here's QuickSight's built-in features that can really be helpful, right? Here's also options that you have where certain SQL analysis will give you the ability to pull outliers straight out of the data that's coming in. All right, exam content, multiple choice, multiple response. Those are the two options of questions. And then, of course, this one has a minimum passing score of 750, right? So you got to be pretty good, pretty confident that you're going to pass before you're ready to pass. Confidence levels. Here I'm with demo questions or there is really no demo questions. That's the first thing, right? What I did to prepare for this one is I went through the Q&A for all of these services, right? I went through the Kinesis Q&A, I went through the Redshift Q&A, I went through Q&As for Kafka. MSK is also going to be part of this exam, and there's going to be questions. So I went through the Q&As, and I was like probably happy to say that I can answer 90% of the Q&As without looking at the answer itself, or when looking at the answer saying, oh yeah, I knew that, right? So for exams that have a 750 score, I look for a confidence level of 90%. If you ask me a question, I need to be able to answer 90% of the stuff. That way I'm going to be happy to pass, right? So a course itself, data collection, right? Data collection, how to efficiently collect and ingest data into your environment. These are going to be questions about S3. These are going to be questions about streaming, about Kinesis data streams, Kinesis Firehose. With Firehose, always know what your targets are, right? Kinesis Data Analytics also always know that for Kinesis Data Analytics, what the input sources are and what the output targets are, right? Always remember that with Kinesis Data Analytics, you can output to Firehose, and then whatever Firehose supports on the back end can be the final target for the environment. Also then storage and data management, right? How to efficiently transfer data, how to efficiently store data, what's the right target storage for your outputs. Here, another service comes into play. It's Elasticsearch, right? Firehose can output either into Redshift or S3 or Elasticsearch. And anytime you're looking at log processing, your Elasticsearch, your Elk stack, right? Elasticsearch, Logstash, Kibana, except you don't have Logstash here because you just have Elasticsearch with Kibana on top, and you feed the logs straight into Elasticsearch itself from, for example, directly from a stream, right? You could feed the logs into a Kinesis data stream, and then have something like an ETL process, feed that into a Firehose, and then Firehose can feed that into Elasticsearch, and then you can use Kibana as a log management solution, as a dashboard on the back end. Processing, here we have different types of processing that were part of this exam. First type of processing, anything that requires the least management possible. Then you have Glue or Lambda as a choice here. Sometimes also, in some circumstances, Kinesis Data Analytics, but Kinesis Data Analytics is kind of limited to what you want to do, right? So for example, Kinesis Data Analytics is good when you're trying to perform some kind of simple SQL query on your environment, on your data as it flies in, right? Whereas if you're doing things like pre-processing data for ingestion into other services where you've got raw data coming in and you don't want to ingest the raw data into your EMR cluster, what you can do is you can use Glue as a pre-processing tool. So any pre-processing questions will definitely be, you definitely should look at the Glue as a good option. Then Lambdas can do other stuff. They can connect to other services. Like for example, if you need to output everything into DynamoDB at the end, let's say you need to clean up some results and then output them into DynamoDB, then here Lambda is a good option because Glue can't really connect to a DynamoDB for output, right? So processing, very, very, very big part of this exam. A lot of questions about processing will say, I need this feature set, right? So when you're looking at the feature set, what kind of analysis they're trying to do, you need to be familiar with kind of features Glue supports, right? Because they're going to be saying, we want to do something like a Spark, PySpark scripts, and we want to run this and this and that option as an analysis, right? And I don't want to get in too much details because then I'm possibly, giving you the answer to the question. I'm saying figure out which features you can do with Glue, and the rest, your option is going to be EMR cluster with Spark on it, right? Again, similar stuff, like for example, you've got this weird file format that's coming in and you want to process this file format directly. One option is Athena, the other option is Presto. We know that Athena can do a lot of file formats, but not all, right? It doesn't support all 5 formats. So here is where Presto is an option. Or maybe it's the data source choice, right? So choosing which data sources you're going to be connected to. If everything is aggregated on S3 already, then of course Athena is going to be a great choice for in-memory SQL operations. Whereas if you are looking at multiple data sources like RDS databases and Elasticsearch and all kinds of other stuff that Athena might not support, then still running an EMR cluster with Presto on it is the right solution. So those are going to be questions about processing. Pretty heavy on processing. So make sure you got all the options covered. You know where your EMR clusters are applicable and your open source tools are applicable. And of course, know when you're feeding something into an EMR cluster, when you require HDFS, when you don't require HDFS, right? Because you're going to also have questions about core nodes and task nodes. With Spark, it's in memory. With Presto, it's also in memory. So, why core nodes if you're already connecting to external data sources? So you might not need core nodes in those situations. And of course, setups for high availability, setups for cost optimization that use reserved instances, that use spot instances and on-demand instances in your EMR cluster, and how that can affect processing, right? So for example, if you choose to run everything on spot instances, how does that affect your processing? You lose master, your head node on your Hadoop cluster, you know, you lose the whole cluster potentially. Well, you do. All right, analysis and visualization. Here, I think that there is much more emphasis on visualization and all on the SQL analytics that are supported inside of the AWS platform. There's not really any talk about any external tools. There were answers in my test that included other solutions, but I always found that the built-in tools for analysis and visualization were the right ones to use. And then security, of course. How do you secure data access? When is it applicable to use IAM? When is it applicable to use your Active Directory or your internal directory for authentication? And then number 3, when does it make sense to use things like Athena workgroups, etc.? Right? Those are crucial, and pretty much security is kind of intertwined into a lot of the questions where a question is talking about we want to we want to run this analysis with as little effort as possible, but then you have 2 possible options, and then one says use a role and the other says use a user, right? But the options are completely possible. So security, maybe, choose a role if a role is at all possible in that environment, right? So yeah, there it is. There's the 5 domains. Now, as I said, I want to compare this to the big data specialty, right? So the big data specialty, let's look at the exam guide itself. Again, this one says 2 years of using AWS technologies, right? It doesn't give the same, let's just move this over here. It doesn't give the same minimum of 5 years experience in the document itself, but as a general rule, it was the 2 years of experience using AWS was sort of on top of, having understanding of open source. Oh, actually it says in the next chapter, 5 years of experience in the data analytics field. So it's same requirements. Understanding architectures, AWS security best practices. So you can see that this looks very much similar, right? Frameworks, Hadoop, Spark, data warehouses, HBase and Redshift, right? And tools and design platforms, batch and real-time processing. The exam content, again, multiple choice, multiple response. Exam results. This one just says, it's kind of dynamic, doesn't have a passing score, right? This was the old way of doing things. It's scored against the minimum standard established by AWS professionals, right? So what is that minimum standard? It's kind of, we're not really telling you. In the new exams, they're actually giving you a number, right? So your results are reported as 100 to 1000 with a minimum of 750 to pass, right? And there were 6 different domains. Before we had 5 domains. Well, now we have 5 domains in the new one. Collection and storage, right? These are sort of now still present, but storage has data management, right? Whereas analysis and visualization are tied into one domain, right? This is sort of the same scope, except analysis and visualization is now one thing, because you can do a lot of the analysis part you can do in the visualization tools, right? You got features in QuickSight that can actually be used for analysis also while visualizing data, right? Now, in the old exam, there was a lot of emphasis also on machine learning, right? You had to know the machine learning frameworks and what they do by name. You had to also know all the open source features that are available on EMR. Right now, there's no real need to understand all the little components, what kind of ML frameworks are supported on EMR, or you don't need to know what your Hive or your Uzi or all the other options, like Jupyter and all those things that were available on an EMR cluster, what they do and how they can be used. That machine learning stuff and a lot of the open source stuff that's connected to machine learning has been moved out to the machine learning exam. So the data analytics specialty is much more focused than the big data specialty exam. And I think that possibly the data analytics specialty, you could even, slice it down into people who work with data, who prepare data, who store it, who clean it up, and then people who actually do analytics and perform visualization, right? So it's like two types of data scientists. We'll see what they come up with, but there's definitely these two roles that we're seeing in businesses a lot. So yeah, if you do either of those, and if you're familiar with AWS enough, you should be able to pass this exam, right? As long as you have. Now, the experience really is key here, right? 5 years with data analytics and 2 years with hands-on working with AWS. Now, there will be questions where it actually requires you to know hands-on, right? Whereas with the big data exam, there wasn't many questions that require you to have hands-on experience. But with this exam, I had a few questions where, what is the setting for this glue job after doing an analysis of your projected performance requirements, right? Yeah, which feature do you need to choose to get the right setting, right? You basically requires you to have hands-on experience with glue. What else was hands-on? Yeah, stuff like importing data into Redshift, right? There was some, how do you optimize this feature here? This question was sort of also connected to having hands-on experience with the tools, right? So that's something that I need to sort of be very, very, emphasize that the data analytics specialty exam, to me personally, feels more of testing whether you do have that applied experience as well. Whereas the big data specialty was, do you know these tools in theory and what they do? Here, it's going to go a lot deeper into features of that specific service. And there was a question about MSK and what happens when you run out of space, when you get an alert for space consumption, right? How do you mitigate that? So again, this is something that you need to sort of be actively working with or have experience with to be able to know what the answer is going to be for this question. Definitely this is good. I think that the big data specialty exam was very wide in knowledge, and whoever passed the big data specialty exam knows that you had to learn a whole trove of different tools and had to understand everything that you need to do in the data analytics exam, and then also understand all the features of HDFS, all the platforms and frameworks and applications that you can use on the EMR cluster. And then on top, know everything about Spark and Spark ML, and also know about the MXNet framework, which is the old stuff that used to be used, and the TensorFlow and all that stuff. So I'm glad that they changed this, and I think it's a good exam. And I think that definitely you need to take a look at this exam if you're in the data analytics field. I think I put this one in number 3 or number 4 in the top 5 exams for 2020. I'm gonna post a link to that video down. That was a video I made a couple of months ago, and definitely this is a very valuable certificate to have. It's not the only data analytics certificate to have, but AWS Certified Data Analytics. There's a lot of data analytics stuff happening in AWS. We do get a lot of requests for sort of big data types of courses. So yeah, it is definitely on the rise, and I definitely recommend anyone who is interested in proving their existing knowledge to take this exam. Otherwise, if you're just looking to get on the roadmap to data analytics, well, first thing, master your architecting, because you're gonna have to know how to architect these solutions. You're gonna have to know how these solutions are designed, and then once you've got the design down, then you're gonna also have to know the security, the operational excellence, basically the 5 pillars of the well-architected framework, right? So essentially, architecting is an underlying requirement for this exam, in my opinion. If you're on the path to getting certified as a data analytics person, at least get started with the systems architect, the solutions architect, associate tier, and then of course, if you have the choice or the will to also go for the professional tier, I definitely recommend that. That is a very, very challenging exam. 80 questions, you had 170 minutes, so it's basically just over 2 minutes per question, and it's super packed with all kinds of features that are very applicable also to this exam, right? How to design your ingestion solutions, how to transfer data from one solution to another. So if you're at the professional tier, you'll see that by having a solid understanding of the tools in the data analytics scope, like Redshift and Athena and Glue, plus all the others that I mentioned before, that you can also find your path there. So solutions architect, associate, and then optionally, I would say solutions architect professional. And then your next step should be learning about analytics, using analytics, getting hands-on, right? Number 3. And then number 4, certified data analytics specialty. All right. I will post the links to my previous video that talks about the solutions architect exam. I will post the link to the top 5 certifications, which is definitely something that I want you to take a look at, because there's really good pointers in there. And I'm going to ask you, if you're interested in these topics and you find them entertaining or find them useful, to subscribe, write a comment here and there on my videos, and put a like here and there. That helps me to know that somebody's listening. Somebody's out there. Is there anybody out there? Right? It's not just me and the mic. Me and Mikey here. We kind of feel lonely in this time of COVID, so show your support. Comment on YouTube. Comment, subscribe, and like. And that is all. Again, this channel is not going to be commercialized. It is designed to share my experience and my knowledge in little tidbits that you can take a look at. And of course, thank you very much for watching. I will see you in my next episode. Bye.